we're going to turn this over to our presenter, Alan Freed. Alan is a former railroader. He was one of the youngest qualified locomotive engineers on the Penn Central back in the 1970s. He had a short but very illustrious career as a railroader. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to turn it over to our guest, Alan Freed. Let's give him a round of applause, everybody.
Okay, am I on now, Mike?
Yep, we hear you and we see you fine. Thank you.
Okay, I want to point out before I start that this is my first ever Zoom meeting. I have no computer in my office, and I'm very lucky that I have a friend here, Dan Brown, who runs an audiovisual company that agreed to come down and help me set this up with Mike. So we'll do the best we can and hope that it goes smoothly. This is asked me to talk about the last trip on the Milwaukee Road, and almost everybody that's listening to this probably knows much more about the Milwaukee Road than I do. And I have a few friends on that may not, so I'll try to keep all the, I'll try not to be too technical and also not to be too basic. So what I thought I would do is, I thought I would give let me just give a quick description of what a speeder is to my friends that are online. And then I thought I'd spend a few minutes talking about my family history, which goes back to the Civil War on the railroad, since this is a historical society, and give a brief description of my railroad career. And then I thought I'd talk about the purchase and preparation of the speeder and the logistics of putting the trip together to go out to Miles City, and then just kind of whip through the slides and take you through the trip, and then do a brief wrap up. So first off, everybody really knows what a speeder is. You know, mine was built in 1952, and it came from the Maine Central Railroad. Let me skip to the speeder stuff and come back to that. My history on the railroad started with that I know of was my grandmother, and I want to put the first slide on if I can, Dan. My grandmother lived to be almost 100, and she had complete total recall, and she started when she was 17 years old as a switchboard operator, a telephone operator for the Pennsylvania Railroad in Pittsburgh with her sister Thelma. And that was the kind where you would stick the little wires in from one to the other. And she met her husband, who was also a ticket agent in the local stop where she commuted to work. Her father was a brakeman on the Union Switching Railroad, and was killed on the job. And she gave me, before I made this first presentation a long time ago, this picture, and she said, on this picture is my grandfather, who was an engineer during the Civil War. And I said, Grandma, which one is he? And she said, you know, I've been looking at this picture for years, and I'm trying to figure out which one it is. I don't know. And she pointed one, and she said, I think he looks the most like me, but I can't see. It's so small, I don't know how she could possibly figure that out, but she was wonderful. My dad was a passenger traffic manager on Atlantic Coastline Railroad, and I was blessed to spend most of my childhood, or all of my childhood and teen years, traveling by train all over the country. When I was in college, I had a Pullman pass to go back and forth to college. I got a job when I was in high school as a jitney driver on the R&P Railroad at Potomac Railroad Yard, and they had I had a little station wagon, number 54, and it had a yellow light on the top that would spin around. And all the locomotives in the yard and Potomac Yard had the same thing. And there was a large tower on top of the hill near the hump yard, and the train master was there, and he could watch the locomotive shifting, and he could look for me. And I don't know if anybody remembers, but there was a television show, and he would always say to me, "Car 54, where are you?" Which was a show at the time, a comedy show. And I would go out and pick the caboose and pick the crews up and take them to the bunk room. I loved it. And then I worked for Fruit Growers Express the next 3 summers. And then I got a job when I got in college over the summer as a brakeman. I was the only college kid working as a brakeman in Potomac Yard. I don't know how many people are familiar. I know most of you are from the Midwest, but Potomac Yard was one of the biggest classification yards in the United States. It had 2 hump yards, I think 5 railroads came in, the B&O and Pennsylvania Railroad from the north, and from the south, the Southern Railroad, the C&O, Atlantic Coastline and Seaboard hooked to the RF&P, and they came into the yard. It was a busy, busy, busy place, which exists no more. All the road crews, would come in, and I thought that was much more interesting than being a brakeman. And so when I graduated from college, I found out that Pennsylvania, Penn Central was hiring firemen. So what happened is, as maybe many of you know, is during the war, there was an exemption for train crews, for engine crews. And but in the beginning, all the young engineers and firemen went off to war, and there was a shortage, and they hired older people to fill the jobs. So as a result, all of a sudden, in around the early 1970s, people started to retire en masse. And so I got hired, and most of the guys that were working with me that had only a bit more seniority hired in 1942, and I hired in 1970. So what usually took 15 to 18 years to get a passenger train as a fireman, and 25 to 30 to be an engineer, I found myself promoted, and I was on 540 on the roster. I was number 6 or 7 on the fireman's list, and it was working passenger trains. Back then, the trains were 100 miles was a day's pay for engineers, and 150 miles on passenger was a day's pay for the train crew. What was so nice about it was that it was 225 miles to New York. It was a high-speed train, and in 12 hours you would get 4.5 days pay. And those firemen, you work 1 day off 2, 1 day off 2. You do that 4 times, and then you were off for 5 days. So it was a wonderful life, and it was a lot of fun. Dan, you want to come back and put some pictures on for me, please? So so that's what I did, and then I left in 1977, and I went on to start a company. Can you go to? I want to go back for a second, and well, let me go to the next picture, Dan, please. There you go. Yeah, we sort of traveled all over the country, as I mentioned. That's my dad. This is in the Royal Gorge when I'm 3 or 4 years old. So we took a 16-day trip around the country. I don't remember much. When I was 4, I believe. And go to the next one. And so this is my buddy that was on the trip with me. This is Chuck Bothwell. We graduated from the same high school class, and we both went to school in the South. I came back and hired on the railroad. And when there was such a shortage, I went and took Chuck up to Baltimore and introduced him to the road foreman, and they gave him a job in engine service too. Back then, to get on the railroad, basically the best way to do it was to have a relative, because they figured the job was so different in terms of 2 hours on call, 7 days a week. Somebody that wasn't used to it in their family might not work out very well. So usually it was word of mouth. They had there was no school at all for the job. You went out for 3 days, and if you did that, and that worked 3 trips, then you had a couple months probation. All of the air tests, the electrical tests, the qualifying on the lines and all that was all done orally, where you'd go in and see the road foreman for 5 or 6 hours, and then you'd go out and go to work. I think it was in many ways very good, because it was everybody watched everybody else, and you really couldn't get ahead or stay unless you knew what you were doing. Everybody gossiped, and everybody knew everybody. And I'm going to show you back. I want to go back. Let me show the next picture of me, if you can't. I can do it. Yeah, this is Chuck and I on Christmas Day. There was a shortage of everybody was marked off sick, and they called me at home during Christmas dinner, and they said, would you take, I think it was 172 to New York? And I said, I'll go if Chuck can be the fireman. And they said, okay. And they were desperate. And so the two of us went down and went up to New York on Christmas Day and came back late in the evening. Let's go back to the very beginning, the ones on the other thing. I want to show you one thing real quick. This is just the contrast to the Pacific Extension. This is Union Station. You can see the Capitol in the distance. And this is just one of the places we'd have to qualify on all the tracks, all the signals. Union Station was a terminal company, had its own railroad, it had its own signals. And then there was the Maryland division and the Chesapeake division in Philadelphia, then the New York division. There was a Harrisburg division that went to Nolan, Harrisburg, up to Susquehanna River. So if you like trains, you had every kind of locomotive imaginable we got to work on and work on all sorts of different places. But let me just show you really quick. This is all downhill coming into the station. These tracks, and this is all pretty much the same, are the Amtrak tracks now to New York City. And all the northern trains come in here. The B&O and all would come over onto these tracks, and this would be towards Chicago over here. And these tracks all in the middle, this maze from the lower would go to Ivy City Engine Terminal, where all the engines for all the railroads were serviced. So it was quite an operation. This is A Tower. One of the most famous towers in railroading is K Tower up here, and then there was a tower down in the tunnel. To the left, if you go down the steep hill and stopped, was where all the southern trains to the south went, and there were tunnels that literally went under the Capitol of the United States and came out in a place called Virginia Avenue and went over the Potomac River. And all of these tracks were dead end in the upper level of the station. The Railway Express was over here, the post office was over here, and at one time there was tracks that went across a bridge literally inside the post office building, So this next picture is pretty famous, and I'm sure everybody's seen it before. This is the wreck of the Federal Express during the inauguration of President Eisenhower. What happened was the train came down. Go back to the picture back one, would you? The train was coming down from Baltimore, and usually you get one or two crossover moves, it got none. And when it was coming down New York Avenue at 80 miles an hour, it put the air on the train and just got a little noise and realized that there wasn't any. It was only the engine in the first car. I put it in emergency, threw it in reverse. The engineer name was Mosier, and I worked with him as a fireman many times. He was a nice guy. He was the fireman on the train. So next picture, go back. So this tower, he called A Tower and said, we have a runaway train. They called K Tower. K Tower called the station master's office, which used to be here. And there was a guy I knew him, his name was Casali. And he picked up the phone and he was screaming, runaway train. This is the main concourse in Union Station. And it's the biggest room in the United States, the biggest indoor room. Not anymore. I think they cut part of it off. It's now a shopping mall. But he ran out, and there was a big newsstand, a beautiful newsstand right in the middle. He ran out and screamed, runaway train. And everybody started running into the main waiting room. And the train hit a block. There was a cement block at the end and knocked it through the ceiling, came out on the concourse and was coming toward the people. And the weight of the locomotive was too much, and it fell down into the post office department, and nobody was killed. And I think it was there was some injuries, but nothing substantial. My dad worked at the station, and his office was just to the right. But this was to show you how things changed. They came during the inauguration, they put curtains all the way around the hole, and the station opened up almost immediately, and people came in and didn't even know that this happened. Now, on my first trip, and I'll get off the railroad, off the Pennsylvania Railroad, on the first trip at Potomac Yard at 1:15 in the morning, I came to work and wanted to make a good impression. And I got up on the engine, and the engineer said to me, go back in the aisle, he said, and take a walk back there and tell me what you see. And I said, okay. And it looked like Captain Nemo's submarine or something. You walk back, and it was all dimly lit with a couple incandescent 25-watt bulbs. I didn't know what the hell I was looking at. It's my first trip. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't see anything. I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking for. And he walked back and he said, you see the seams? He said, here. And he said, here, all the welding. He said, this is the 4876 engine. This is the train that went into Union Station. He said, they cut it in 3 pieces. They took it back to Wilmington shops and put it back together. And it was still running pretty much when I left the railroad. So let me get off that. Let's go back to where we were, if we could please, Dan. Okay, now to the speeder. So when I'm off the railroad, I started reading about the Milwaukee Road abandonment, and you realize that, for me anyway, when they start talking about something awful happening on the railroad, it's probably going to happen. And so I was convinced that they would do it no matter how insane it was, that they were literally going to rip out this track. And I thought, this is nuts. This is something that will never be again, and I should try to figure out a way to go see it. So somebody told me, I honestly can't remember, it's a long time ago, somebody told me that the Maine Central in Waterville, Maine had some speeders, and they might be for sale. They were sitting in a junk heap. So I called up, got the the train master or the yard master on the phone, and I said, "Hey, I'm Alan Freed. I'm calling from Washington, D.C., and I'm a train engineer, and I would like to buy a speeder." And he said, "I think there's a couple of them down in the lower 40 in a boxcar." And he said, "If you want to come on up, I'll show them to you, and I'll sell you one." And I said, "Well, how much?" And he said, "I don't know, maybe $400." So I got on the train with a friend of mine, and we the night train, rented a car and went up to Waterville. It was freezing cold. And I saw the speeders, and I walked out and I said, "I thought they were in a boxcar." And he said, "Oh," he said, I thought you wanted a velocipede." And I said, "You have velocipedes?" And he said, "Yeah, we got some of them down in the boxcar." So I said, "Well, let me think about the speeder, and I'd probably like to buy a velocipede too." So we went out, and he said, "Just take your pick." And they've been sitting for years, I guess. So I just picked one that didn't have a broken windshield. And so then we had to get it shipped to the house. And this is the one I picked. And got a giant truck. The truck showed up at my parents' house. I was living in an apartment. And it was hilarious. I had about 5 or 6 guys there, and they opened the back of the truck. It was a huge truck. And there in the corner was this little speeder. So we got it down, put it in the backyard. It was a sunny summer day. The windows were open. I went in the house, and these guys were good. They got on the speeder, and they got it running almost immediately. And it belched black smoke like you couldn't believe. My mom went berserk. The whole house was filling up with smoke. So we got it turned off, got it going. And then I had this wonderful friend named Chick Stanton, and he was a Porsche guy, and he came over to the house, and he spent, I don't know, off and on a week or so, a couple of weeks fixing it up. I got a trailer. This is the velocipede. I restored the velocipede. I got a trailer from my neighbor who owned a gas station, and it was a little sailboat trailer. And we put railroad tracks on it, made some ramps, got a little crank, and it was called a dilly. And it had these little half-moon hubcaps on it. It was a little single axle trailer. And somebody told me, he says, those dilly half-moon hubcaps are really valuable. He says, as a matter of fact, it's probably more valuable than the trailer. So anyway, got the dilly, fixed the dilly up, got the speeder, and had the speeder. And Chick then put electric on it, put headlight on it, he put a tail light on it. We got a rope and with a lathe and made like the handle on an E8 horn, hooked it to a Porsche horn at the top, cleaned it all up, painted the wheels silver, and then I'm in great shape, but I have no way to get to Miles City. So he said, "Look, you've gone this far. My wife has a Ford Falcon station wagon, or 1962. He said, you need to go on the trip. He said, I'll sell it to you for $200. So I bought the station wagon, and some friends were here from Holland, and went and showed them the speeder. They couldn't believe it. And they said, how are you going to take it? And I said, we're going to tow it on this car. His wife looked at it. She said, that's not a car. It's a graveyard. It's a graveyard. And that was the name that stuck. So for all these years I had it, everybody said, let's go get the graveyard and go take a trip. So now I've got the car. I've got the speeder. I got the trailer. And so I called up Chuck, and my buddy that's working on the railroad. He became a train master. Then he worked for Amtrak. He became vice president of Amtrak. Worked with Graham Claytor. Then he's a stockbroker now in Jacksonville, Florida. So we got that. So we're figuring out what to do. Now remember, there's no cell phones. There's no things like that to make easy communication. And we needed to get it there. And there's no way that I was going to drive this thing out there and then back. So it was summertime, and Chick's wife, Katie, said, I know 2 kids that are really nice. They're William and Mary. They're home for the summer. I'll ask them if they want to take the speeder. So I met them. They were great kids. And they said, we'd love to do it. Just pay our expenses. It's a big adventure, but you cannot, we won't be available in the afternoon to run and pick you guys up. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, what we're going to watch is a television show that we watch in the afternoon. And I said, what would that be? And he said, well, we're into Days of Our Lives or something like this. So they had this television that they had to find someplace with antennas to plug in to watch the show. And my dad then was great. He became sort of the dispatcher. So the kids would call at a regular certain time during the day, and we would call where we could find a place to stop where there might be a phone, and call my dad and tell him where we are. I went to the US Geological Survey and got some giant rolled up maps of the whole thing. And so I could kind of plot out where we'd be and where there'd be a dirt crossing or something. And then they would come, we'd load it back on the dilly. And then, if we needed to, which you'll find out was not really, wasn't really necessary. Okay, so now we're all set. So I'm getting kind of cold feet. I'm thinking, I'm going out on this track, it's abandoned. Do you think it would be wise to either just go do it, or maybe call up the Milwaukee Road in Chicago and tell them what I'm going to do and ask them if it's okay, if they would have any problem, if I can just get a waiver. So I called up the Chicago, and I got this woman on the phone, and I said, I'm an engineer, and I've got this speeder, and the track's abandoned, and I just would let you know we're going to come out and take a ride. And would there be do we need a waiver or anything? I don't even remember, it's been so long. But anyway, somehow I called her and asked, and she came, and she said that she'd check into it. And she called me back and she said, no, you can't do it. And I said, and I'm really panicked now. I've got a dilly, I've got a graveyard, I've got a speeder, it's all fixed up and ready to go. And they're saying I can't do it. So I'm thinking, this is worse. I shouldn't have called. I should have just gone out there. So I said to her, look, I've got the ICC form. I was down at the interstate. I knew somebody there that gave me all this abandonment information. And you're officially abandoned that railroad on such and such a day. It's abandoned. So I'm going to go anyway. And she said, well, I can see your point, but why don't you let me check on this again and I'll call you back. And she called me. She said, okay. She said, no problem. We'll send you a waiver, sign the waiver, and you can go. So that was a big relief. So we fly out. Chuck and I fly out somewhere. I don't know. I live in I think, Montana. Now everybody has, is that right? Does everybody have the schedule, the timetable that I sent to Mike? I don't know if you do or not. Where is that? Not here. Anyway, so organized. Yeah, okay. Did everybody see the timetable? I don't know if you have it or not, but so I had the timetable that I got from the Olympia, Hiawatha, of all the trains in 1953. And I looked at it and I saw that, Miles City, obviously 1,000, milepost 1,119. And then I noticed some of the towns were bold, like Millstone and Harlowton. And you could see that at Harlowton, they were there for 20 or 30 minutes. So you knew that was a crew change place. And then you assumed all of these small, I assumed all of these small places like Paragon and Sheffield were just villages. So I figured we'd, if any worse comes to worse, we got to Miles City. We could always at Paragon, 12 miles down the track, check and if we needed any help. So anyway, we get into to Miles City, and we get off of Billings and we're driving toward Miles City. The plane was late. It's about 10 o'clock. We're starving, and I see this restaurant in Forsyth on the side of the road. So it looked perfect. It was raining like hell. It's cold. So we got off, went into the restaurant, really hungry, and it was really like a crowded place. It was late at night, and had dinner. And this woman was great. I don't know, had a breakfast or a regular dinner. I don't remember, but we ate there, and then we went another 12, 14 miles to Miles City and stayed at a place, as you can see, called the Olive Hotel. The Olive Hotel, nice old place, very friendly. And right to the left of it is the railroad tracks. So we didn't have far to go. You could see the tracks. And the next morning, when we're checking out in the morning, it's cold. It is so cold. It's August. And I thought, I can't believe this weather. It's rainy and cold, probably 45 degrees, windy. And I want to get this early. I just want to get the speeder on the track and get it started because it's right in downtown and get out of town. I don't want any police coming. I don't want any problems before I start. So here's the tracks right down the street from the hotel. Now, a speeder is, as everybody knows, is the one I had, an M-19 is a hand crank, make or break engine. And you crank it forward, you set the timing. It has a Model T coil. And sometimes if you don't, I didn't understand exactly how the timing would work. Just as it's ready to start or stop, it sometimes will kick backwards. There's no reverse or forward, and you have no control over it until you start to figure out the nuances of it. This is facing east, and this is facing west. So we got on the track here, and this old station, and you see a red signal. This is the we will see only one more colored signal for the next 7 days. It's very strange for two guys to roll by a stop signal. That seems weird. So we got the speeder, get it cranked up, it won't start. Try and try and try. Finally, it tries to start. We get in it, push the throttle forward, and it goes backwards. By this time, 2 or 3 kids are coming out, and people are starting to gather around, wondering, what the hell, where are you going? What are you doing? This is a view to the right. So finally, we get it started. It's reluctantly sputtering and not running very well. And we start to leave town. And this was here, the old plow. And we come into the river. What is it, Missouri? Now, what river is this? Missouri? I'm not sure. If anybody knows, they can put it up. I didn't look, but we crossed the river, and it's running pretty good. And then we come to Paragon. This is Paragon. I thought Paragon would be a town, but this is Paragon, and you can see the red sign. This means block signal, end of block. You need train orders to go past there, is what I'm assuming this means. Well, at this point, the speeder dies and won't start. We're in the middle of nowhere, and it's cold, and we've only gone about 8 or 9 miles. So this is the view. Now, I'm going to just a quick aside on the slides. I made this presentation in 1985, and I put the slides in the basement of my office, and we did construction. It's a 200-year-old building, and they sat in a box for 15 or 20 years. Jim Lilly, the president of the Historical Society, asked me to do the annual banquet, and it took almost a month to clean those slides. And if Pat or Kara is watching this, you know very well how much time we spent to make those slides. Some of them were faded, some were filthy, and to try to get them back in order. So that's why the slides are not exactly what they once were. But this is the view to the right, and we're pushing. You can see the wind. Now, so I notice across the field about a mile, you can't tell the distance, maybe a mile away. I don't know. It was really far. There was a little white house, but it didn't look like there's no car or anything. So I said, okay, Chuck, I'll walk over there. You start pushing, and I'll go see if anybody's home, if there's a telephone, and we can call back to Miles City. Maybe somebody can help us. So I started walking and walking and walking and walking. And as we got closer and closer and closer to the house, it became apparent that this was more than likely abandoned. It was like out of an Alfred Hitchcock movie. There was a front porch, and there was a screen door slamming on and on, back and forth on the front. So I walked through the gate, walked up, and the front door was open. And I went in and went around in the house. There was a mattress on the floor, and went back in the kitchen, and there was an old style telephone on the wall. And I picked the telephone up, and the line was cut. So I thought, oh, great. So walked the whole way, more of an angle, walked back, met up with Chuck, and we just started pushing the speeder. And we pushed another mile or two, and the house was way over here. And we come to this house. There's a house next to the track. I couldn't believe it. Pretty nice house. And I walked over to the door, knocked on the door. There's nowhere near any road. And this young guy comes to the door, and like, what the hell? Who is this? And there's looking for a car in front of the house. There's no car. And he says, who are you? And I said, we just came here on a speeder. We're on we're going down the tracks and it doesn't work. It won't start. And so the guys come out, and one guy you'll see has a cat, his arm is wrapped up to the elbow and with gauze and stuff. And he says, you're really lucky we're here. He said, I said, why? He says, well, we're professional rodeo cowboys and we're supposed to be in Montreal this weekend, but I got bitten by a rattlesnake. And the other guy said, yeah, he's always playing with snakes. This has happened before. So they came out and started looking at it, and we're trying to figure out what to do. And they call up back to Miles City, and they call their uncle, who is a washing machine repairman. And you can see, here's the guy's arm. They were really neat guys. And so we got everything apart, started working on it. Now we're like 5 o'clock in the evening, 4 o'clock, and the sun is out, and we're still like another 30 miles from Forsyth. He said, if we weren't home this weekend, he said, the next house, he said, is 11 miles from here. So we got the speeder going, and we hit, and here's this dog. And I guess if you're a rodeo bull rider, you can have a dog like this without any worry whatsoever. So we got the speeder going and headed off. And this is the sunset heading toward Forsyth. Okay, back. Okay, yeah, we're back. And so we walk in. Oh, then they picked us up that night and they took us to a square dance, to a dance in town. And then in the morning, how do I go backwards? Back one. Then we come by our restaurant, but unfortunately, we were really excited about having breakfast there, but it's now Sunday morning and it's closed. So we walk across the bridge and back to Forsyth. This is the station. And here's our speeder. It is, I have to tell you, it's very strange to leave a speeder or something on the main line of a railroad and just walk away. So we came back in the morning, beautiful day. I'm going too fast or slow. This, if somebody can make a note, or I don't know if I'm going to, will I see anybody, if they have any comments, will something come on the screen? Do you know, Jim, can you tell me? Is that, how that works?
You had one question, Alan, so far. Question was, what'd you do with the speeder at night? And I think you sort of answered it. You just kind of left it on the main after the first day.
This is Jim Lilly, the president of the former president of the Railroad Society. It's been getting me to come out. They got me to get all these slides cleaned off and come do the presentation. Jim, would you mind asking the questions as we go along then? Jim?
No, I don't mind at all.
Okay, so we're come back to the station in the morning. That's me when I was a kid. That's Chuck, and we head off from Forsyth. The first day we figured we did about the first 12 miles. We did about 8 miles riding and about 4 miles pushing. So we take off in the morning. It's a beautiful morning. We're heading toward Harlowton. We didn't take beer. This is the cooler we bought in town that night. So this is all our stuff. We're again probably trying to get it going for fooling with it or something. I don't know what we're doing. The crossings, you can see had gravel on it, but I have to tell you, the track was we were shocked how good the track was. So I think a lot of the stuff about how terrible the Milwaukee Road and falling apart, we didn't see it. I mean, it was easily a lot of it 35, 40 mile an hour track. This is, I think, Vandana. I think I looked it up. I think, yeah, this is the school, and the school, I think it was built in abandoned in 1920, or built in 1920. Okay, so we get up, going up the hill. The wind is blowing so hard. The speeder's not working. It's starting to overheat again. We're playing with it, trying to make it work. The coil is in here, see, and we come into a place called Ingomar, I think. Yeah, Ingomar, Montana. Here's a steam engine tender. Here's the old station. We get up barely into Ingomar, and I said, okay, I'll walk into town and see if we can call the washing machine repairman. Maybe he'll come back. So I walk into town, and the town is a dirt road and a bunch of old buildings like a Western movie. And there's a bar at the end that's packed with people, and there's a phone booth, but the phone doesn't work or nobody answers and nobody wants to help. So I went back, changed the spark plug, cleaned up the coil, and we got it working again. The place that I stopped at, the restaurant, I looked it up about 3 or 4 years ago on Google Maps, and it still exists. It's called Jersey Lily's Restaurant and Bar. And on Yelp or TripAdvisor, it's rated #1 in Ingomar. Of course, it's the only restaurant in Ingomar, but it's rated #1.
Hey, Alan, you got
Yeah.
a question. How did you get gas to the speeder? Because you probably couldn't just pull up to a Wawa.
No, that we have a big can of gas and oil on the back, and it gets pretty good mileage. So we were fine on that. So I think it would go like, I can't remember, but maybe 100 miles on a tank, and we had another tank. So we were in pretty good shape. No, there was definitely no Wawa. This is, to me, at this point, I'd been to the west in the Rockies, but I'd never been in the prairie and the plains. I thought the plains was just spectacular. It was so vast and so desolate. And you're out here on this putting along on this speeder. It was just beautiful to me. Okay, this is, let me see if I have the bigger map here somewhere I can see. I think this is, I think this is Melstone. It's either Sumatra or Melstone. And I looked for the New Alcala Cafe a couple of years ago, and I tried on Google Maps to ride around town to find it and look at the street name. She came out and looked when she heard the noise, and we had a horn, so we blow the horn quite a bit before we came into town for maximum effect, because people wouldn't expect to hear a horn. And she ran back in and got her husband to come out. And this is Roundup, Main Street Roundup. And again, we're running kind of late. These guys came out on their motorbike. They were great. We talked for a while, and they had a couple dogs there, and they're really curious. You know, they say, "Where are you going?" You say, "We're going to Seattle," and they go, "Okay." This is a Lavina. I looked that up before the last one that I did out at Olympia when I went out and made a presentation. And so people are trying to fix this up as a trendy hotel. I don't know. It seems like kind of sketchy to me. This is the only time we almost had an accident. I had my sack in front of the brake lever, and a semi-tractor trailer went down. I went to jam the brake forward, and it wouldn't go forward. This is, now we're heading toward Harleton. This is the Northern Pacific crossing over. Let me go back one. Can I go back one, please? When we got stone dark, and we were coming near Harleton, and what the ranchers would do, they would, there would be on each side of the track, there'd be a bank a lot of times, and it'd be barbed wire, but they would open the gates on both sides. They owned both property, and the cattle could go from one side to the other. And our luck, when we're about 3 miles outside of Harleton, a herd of cattle was coming down through the gates, down onto the track to go up, I assume, to the other side. And when they heard the speeder, they went batty, and they all funneled the whole herd down the track in front of us. And so there's barbed wire on each side, up a hill. It's narrow, and I turned the engine off, and we glided up into the herd of cattle, and we sat there, and you could touch the cows. They were in the front of the thing, they were around us, and making kind of mooing and just kind of minding their own business. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do if I start this thing up? What are the cows going to do? And I know that there's a river up ahead, and maybe there's a bank, and maybe the cows will freak out. I don't know what cows do, but maybe they'll fall over the bank into the river. And when we get to Harleton, there'll be police there to get us from the rancher. And I didn't know what the hell to do. So we sat there for freezing for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And then we pushed the speeder a little bit through the cows, and finally I had enough of it. And I started up the engine, and they kind of just spread apart. We just inched up, and we went into Harleton, and we arrived. We can go. I can go to the next one. So I arrived in Harleton, and one of the things that just worked out well, we brought camping stuff. This is the train station. We came in this way. This is the train station. And we're at the hotel, which I'll show you, called the Graves Hotel. And this cafe is the beanery for the Milwaukee Road, or was the beanery. It was open 24/7 still. So we came up and had a great meal there. We also went to the hotel first, I don't remember. And we checked into the Graves Hotel late at night. I walked in, no reservation, went to the desk, and I said, do you have a couple rooms available? And you can see there wasn't any cars in front of the place. And he said, yeah, he said, just all the doors are open, just the nice ones up at the top. He said, just pick whatever room you want. And so we went up and then went and had dinner, I think, and then came back up, and we're exhausted. Back one. And this was my balcony out off my room with the view out on the tracks in the Belt Mountains. Okay. Then in the morning, we went back down to the station. Now, this was significant. Was the trip so far was Saturday and Sunday. It's now Monday morning, and Monday is work week. And here's the station, old roundhouse, and I look to the right, and up ahead is 2 Milwaukee Road employees in a high rail. So we're loading our stuff up, and the high rail is there, and nobody's saying anything to anybody. And I was going to go talk to him, but I thought, well, let's load up and see what happens. And the guy walks back to me, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Yes, we're going up to Seattle." And he looked at the speeder, and he looked down at the license plate, and he said, with a Virginia license plate, and he said, "You guys have to have a license plate on a speeder back there?" I said, so anyway, they went. I think they said, "We're going to go ahead. We're going to be doing a lot of work up ahead. We'll go first, and we'll probably be out of your way well before you catch up with us." So we took off from Harleton, and it was just beautiful day. I mean, it was just beautiful. The scenery, and you see the old electric lines. It's just beautiful. It's the Belt Mountains, and then this is Two Dot, Montana. I thought there'd be a town. I don't know, maybe I read that the Hank Williams Jr. has a song about, I'm from Two Dot and I don't give a damn. I'm a Montana cowboy and I don't give a damn. I don't know if it was a big hit or not, but there was a song about Two Dot. And so here we are headed straight. This was just fantastic. And then we come to Martindale, which I think the station is gone. There was still a little village in Martindale. And you notice all the signals are out. You start to see weeds are starting to grow, but look at the track. It's not bad. Okay, so we come to a crossing and there's a truck there. And there's this guy standing on the track. He's waiting for us. And this is not good. We know this. So we stop, and he's from the Milwaukee Road. And he was the superintendent or something out in the Harleton district. And he got a telephone call that two yo-yos are on a track with a Fairmont Speeder heading west. I guess the guys called from the high rail. And I'm thinking, oh, is he going to try to kick us off the track, or what's he going to do? But we chatted and talked about railroads, and he asked us some questions about where we worked and whatnot. And he was a nice guy. And he left. So I didn't know what that portended, but he left. And we took off. Oh, here you go, Jim. This is putting gas in. We're gassing up.
Hey,
Yeah, so
Alan,
yeah.
What camera were you using?
I had an old Nikon manual camera, and it was what happened was really awful. I had gone out on the velocipede a week before the trip, and it fell on the track, and it cracked the case. And I sent it to New York on express mail because there was no Federal Express to get it fixed. And it came back, and the light meter was broken. So I had this thing. So I had to guess a lot on light. So I had an old Nikon with a 110, I think, and a 55 lens, and Chuck had a Pentax. And some of these pictures, because they were to make this presentation, he sent me his, and we kind of interspersed his with mine.
Was that guy the only people you saw working out on the road from the railroad, or were there other people out there?
So far, that's it. So Saturday and Sunday, 0. And then now we're Monday morning, and the 2 guys on the high rail that have gone ahead of us, and this manager, superintendent, or whatever you call it, boss that came to see us. This is, I think, Lenup. Let me see if I'm right on this. Lenup or Loweth. Lenup or Loweth. It's painted pretty nice, these 2 places, a church and a little general store. I don't think that anybody's used it. At this point, I'm going to go up over the mountains, and you can see it's going to be steep. And this is to the left what I'm seeing, and the track is going up one of these hills over the mountain. And I'm thinking this is not going to be good with the wind and all. So we get over to that, and we get out and push, but the engine's still running, and we're letting the belt slide on it to help us. So there's no weight of the speeder. The speeder's okay as long as we're not on it. So we hop on and off, we get some speed up, and we made it up to the top. And this is the one of the stations, the electrical substations that along the way for electricity. And I guess most people know that you go up the mountain, and then you do regenerative dynamic braking back down the mountain, and the engine would actually replenish the electricity in the power station. It was really ingenious. I think I looked it up. I think the GG1 was 11,000 volts. And I think the Milwaukee, again, most people would know more than me, I think it was 3,300 volts. This is the track going up the hill. So we're going to loop around and then up this hill, over the hill toward Ringling. This is a church. Let me see. I think I've got the name of the church still somewhere. What day? This is Monday. Yeah, this is the Trinity Lutheran Church. It was built in 1910, and it's still active, I think. This is coming down into Ringling. This is where there was a spur line up to White Sulphur Springs to Yellowstone Park. I think the station might still be there. I'm not. 16 Mile Canyon, you can see that there's a wreck. Now, for this part of the trip, there's no doubt about it that through 16 Mile Canyon was one of the most spectacular trips I've ever been on or ever seen. I'm not talking about because it had giant mountain trail, but the way this was cut through this canyon was just really unbelievable. And it's almost, I've looked and looked and looked because I've tried to figure out how to go back, and it's almost impossible to get in there. And I don't know if it's true or not, but everybody says Ted Turner owns most of it, or a lot of it. So this is going down into 16 Mile Canyon, and this will take us over to Three Forks.